Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Big Bros podcast. My name is Ilan, and I'm joined by my lovely friend and co-host, Jeremy. How are we?
Well, mate. Well, good to be chatting this episode. Boy, we've been excited about it since we've seen this great man live. I'm keen to dive into it.
Mate, oh my God. I remember driving the car home with you, and we may have recorded some of his beautiful insights that he spoke about, and honestly, probably the best live show I've ever been to. I've seen Jordan Peterson, I've seen a few other live shows here and there, but there was something unique about Chris Williamson's delivery. The fact that he spoke for 90 minutes as well. Like, you go to concerts and their performances aren't usually like 90 minutes, usually like an hour and a half, but just the ability to keep going, and New Tonic must be serving him well.
Yeah, well, it was 90 minutes of him talking, and then we got that extra 20 to 30 minutes of a live Q&A as well, which was epic. So it essentially was 120 minutes of beauty from Chris Williamson. And yeah, I think I even went as far as saying by the end of the performance, I remember turning to you and saying like, that was better than like any live music performance I've seen. But, that's when you're in the moment and you've got that recency bias. But, it just went to show that it really pulled the strings in my heart. It made us feel that sense of wow, that gratitude, that desire, that determination to go and chase that dream that, we are chasing. And he just spoke so well to us and to everyone in that room.
He's beautiful inspiration, and his lessons is something that we've kind of explored before, but I think this is an excellent opportunity for us to actually delve into some of those lessons that he talked about in such great depth and put our own spin on it. So without further ado, Jeremy, what is one lesson you extracted?
Well, first one was that he spoke a lot about choosing the regrets that you want to live with. What a fascinating topic. I mean, you see it in Hollywood all the time, people getting tattoos like no regrets, and, the notion of being encouraged to live without regrets because, anything that you experience and anything that you endure is a lesson learned. So it's never a regret. But he said that, sometimes life is actually about choosing the regret that you want to live with. And it made me think about, what does that mean? Because that just sounds like something potentially profound, but you don't actually know why it's profound, and you don't know why it actually is such a nice one-liner. And what it basically meant in the way in which he described it was, in life, we're all going to endure pains. We're all going to have sufferings. We're all going to be faced with challenges, and you need to choose which ones are you willing to go through, and therefore which things are you maybe willing to forego, because you're not going to be able to dip your toes in everything in life if you really want to hone in on one thing in particular. So that can be a particular skill. It can be a particular pursuit, like a job, a career, even a relationship, a friendship. You got to choose the regrets that you're happy to live with. So what are the things in life that you can rest assured at night and say, like I'm willing to forego that. I'm willing to maybe not be at my best in this realm if it means being at my best in a different realm, or better in a different realm, and finding which ones work for you. And I think just why this was such an empowering lesson for us is because it made us feel a sense of liberation. It made us feel like we don't have to try to be the best in everything we do. Because that's not humanly possible. Like, you are only human, we are only human, and we're going to make mistakes, and we're not going to be able to be our very best in everything. So being able to live with certain regrets is just that liberating thought that you're going to be able to do certain things in life well, and there's also things that you're going to not do so well, and that's okay.
It's because there's an opportunity cost to everything you do, and I think you're completely right. We're sold this narrative nowadays, we can do everything, and with that comes the connotation that you can live a life where you don't regret anything. But the truth of the matter is there's going to be things that you forego. If you're going all in on a business idea that requires you to just be working 24/7, the Alex Hormozy style, yeah, there's going to be a reward at the end of it. But for that short period of time, that might mean not going for a year's travel somewhere with friends and, blowing your money on a gap year, which is completely fine and each to their own. But the point is, can you live with that regret? Can you live knowing that the decision you make in the long run, it's going to serve you, but there's going to be a short-term cost? Can you tolerate that? Another thing I really loved about that statement as well is when I realized that I wanted to become a psychologist when I was kind of 19, 20 years old, and I was looking down the barrel of a lot of study for me, is because a lot of times people would ask me, what is it that you want to do for a career? You know, you come out of school, you're 18, 19, parents, family, friends, they all ask you, what do you want to do? What kind of career do you want? And I think that language, whilst it can be helpful, it's sometimes more helpful to make things a little bit more practical. Because something he said, which I also resonated with, is even in the best jobs that are most existentially aligned with what you believe your purpose is, there's going to be days where you have to eat the shit. And that was a really helpful thing for me to remember, because when I was a 19-year-old and I wanted to figure out what I wanted to do, something that helped me, and I think Jordan Peterson talks about this as well, is it's choosing your sacrifice. It's choosing things you can endure more than other people. Because the truth of it is there's going to be negatives in any job you do. So like, I knew that I would be able to tolerate, or at least at the time, and you know, my hypothesis is correct because I'm doing my master's now, but at the time my thought was, I could probably endure the drawbacks and the disadvantages of a psych career more than I would maybe becoming an engineer. So I made it really practical for myself. And I think that's good because it's more kind of aligned with reality. Because again, back to that first point, we're sold this myth that if even in this ideal world where we find something that is so existentially aligned that there's not going to be negatives about it. Like there's going to be crap in every role. For me, that could be like, you know, and you probably as well with physio, you hate doing the clinical notes. I hate doing the clinical notes. I don't hate it, but it's like there's more fun in the other aspects, like talking to people. That's the reason I did the degree that I did. But the truth is I can tolerate those negative and maybe more mundane moments than, you know, crunching a few Excel spreadsheets working on Collins Street.
Number 2 that we learned from him surrounded around men's mental health. What did he say?
I found this point really fascinating, and I had never thought about it in the way that he kind of described it. He pretty much said that nowadays we tend to respect and stigmatise less the men who have accrued almost man points before they open up.
Man points.
So the idea being is that
something that we'd never heard about what the hell are man points? What are male points?
So the idea being is that oftentimes those men who have achieved something that are on the lines of like accumulating
greatness,
resources, status, and money in very masculine domains, once they have achieved all these kind of socially admirable goals, only then can they garner public respect and attention and, you know, almost respect for them opening up and them being vulnerable. So the idea being is if you haven't achieved those man points and you're kind of at the bottom of that totem pole, you're not going to get the same sympathy. In fact, you're going to be regarded as weak, feeble. But if someone, and this is what Chris Williamson said, someone like a Chris Bumstead who has accumulated those man points, for example, by becoming probably the best modern day bodybuilder, and he can talk about vulnerabilities, his own insecurities. As a society, we're a bit like, because there's an element to it which is like he's a human being. Like we see him in these, you know, maybe idealized goggles. So when someone says, nah, I'm quite insecure about this, I've got this form of trauma that's, you know, really fucking with me. For someone, you know, to us as the public eye, we look at that and think, well, they're just a human being. And I think we're more likely to respect that. But his idea is that the thing is there's still a lot of stigma around men's mental health, especially for those men who haven't accumulated those man points. So if they were to open up, they're only going to be evaluated negatively.
Yeah, I think that man point type of mantra can be synonymous with like kind of like a halo effect for men's mental health. It's like, you know, the man that has gone out and has conquered and has achieved has that halo effect already. Like that's the societal halo effect they have. And therefore, because of that, they are more like people reciprocate and not reciprocate. That's the wrong word, but people resonate more when listening to them, therefore be vulnerable and open up. So I think, yeah, that halo effect is a nice way to think about that man point type of mantra. And yeah, that whole Chris Bumstead, two elite Chris's that we love, but that whole Chris Bumstead example just made it make sense. Because, you know, here you've got like a 6-time Mr. Olympia, just such a figure in terms of strength, manliness, you know, being able to go out there and achieve, and at the same time, such a vulnerable and open person. And that's why Chris Bumstead is so loved as well. But yeah, for the person that hasn't gone achieved six-time Mr. Olympias and, isn't just, this massive public figure, for the man that is just, working his 9-to-5 job to make ends meet and providing for the family and living a mundane but wholesome life, it's as if, we do see that stigma still in terms of opening up. So accruing that level of man points, those male points, I think it's just something to be aware of more than anything. I don't think it's something that you need to achieve. And that's the whole thing. We want to erase that whole man point type of thing. It's a stigma and it's something that, just needs to go. And we need to just be mindful of the fact that, it doesn't matter if you have, if you've achieved six times Olympias or you're just working that mundane job, you don't need to achieve those man points in order to open up and in order to express. But it was that whole adage that just blew our minds.
And the truth of the matter is it's the people who haven't achieved those kind of man points that require the most support and the most sympathy. On a more positive one, or I guess a more neutral one, tell us about another learning.
Yeah, number three learning that we learned from the live show was that outsourcing your self-worth to the crowd is dangerous. So a theme that we speak a lot about, I think, on the podcast, but the whole adage of, you need to be your own biggest supporter, your own biggest cheerleader. And if you go relying on the external validation of others, the input from others constantly, then who are you really doing it for at the end of the day? And what is your end goal? And Hormozi has a very simple quote, but a quote that speaks really well to this topic. And that is, nobody roots for you until everybody roots for you. So keep applauding yourself. Basically, the message being that, nobody is going to support you until you are up at the top or you're getting towards the top. And sometimes and oftentimes when you are at the top, that's when people want to bring you back down to earth and when people want to tear you down. Why? Because you remind them of the dreams that they have not achieved. So people want to root for you when you're on the way up. When you get to that place on the way up, they want to bring you back down. So it actually doesn't matter what stage of the journey you are on, because people are either not going to root for you, then they're going to root for you a little bit, but then they're going to bring you back down to earth again. So you just need to keep rooting for yourself and reminding yourself that if you're not doing it for you and truly for you, and for you doesn't mean from a selfish type of perspective, but it's for you from a sense of fulfillment. Like, are you getting true fulfillment in your self-worth from your actions, or is the self-worth only coming from external validation?
It's not sustainable, is it? You can't rely on other people's evaluations of you as your own marker of self-worth and self-esteem. And he shared a beautiful quote from Rick and Morty, which was, your boos do not bother me. I've seen what makes you cheer. The idea being there is like, why would your negative evaluations of me bother me when I see what amuses you? When I see what kind of, superficialities in life arouse your interest?
Yeah.
Why do I take your opinion with any sense of credibility? And I thought that was an excellent point, because you couple that with also the fact that even the people who make criticisms about you, they don't care about you either. It's maybe an observation or a critique they make, but they don't spend their waking hours thinking about you. Maybe you think that they do, but truthfully, they're probably more worried about themselves. And I think the best antidote to any of this is knowing your own values. It's actually writing down, and I'm huge on this, and I've talked about this on the podcast before. I think one of the best things anyone can do is actually get clear on what their true values are. Because when your behaviors are in congruence with your values, you start to care less about what other people's opinions are of you. Because the thing is, if you don't have a solid base, if you don't know yourself, you don't know what you care about, what you believe in, then you're way more likely to be influenced by the crowd. You're way more likely to be influenced by peer pressure. And the truth of it is that you'll never truly be satisfied, because everything's extrinsic. It's not intrinsic.
Yeah, and I think in terms of an anecdotal type of experience that I've had recently with this was what I just did in terms of my own Instagram activity recently was I put up a photo of me shirtless, and that was just celebrating like the goals I've achieved for my weight loss goals, my fat loss goals recently, which we'll be talking about on the podcast. And just posting that photo, I had that much fear because, you know, the thoughts go through your mind of, you know, are people going to see this as narcissistic? Are people going to think, geez, this guy is so full of himself because he's posting himself looking good, and, you know, he's essentially asking people to ask him questions to, you know, offer tips, and, you know, what a self-indulgent type of thing. And all of these thoughts go through your mind because we're so wired now to think about what other people think of us. That's the nature of social media. I think it's just the nature of being in Australia as well with tall poppy syndrome. But, you know, after talking to a couple of people, and shout out Jack McIntosh, legend of a bloke from Perth, he really was a driver for me in this as well, because he said, mate, like, you got to do what you want to do in terms of your own fulfillment, and secure people aren't going to look at that and think, what a dickhead. They're not going to look at that and envy you. Like, secure people truly celebrate those wins in other people and have respect and have admiration for other people publicizing their achievements and publicizing the good that they want to put out into the world. So we shouldn't feel so ashamed to do that. And, you know, this is where, although I am sometimes critical of like American culture, this is an element of American culture that I fucking love, because I think the culture in America is a lot of building each other up. You know, they're really good at saying, like, you know, go get that, like, you go, let's go, like, really building each other up and celebrating achievements. Whereas in Australia, you know, we've got that tall poppy syndrome. We beat each other down. We bring each other back down to earth. We're afraid to be expressive of our positivity in terms of our achievements, because we're afraid to come across as not humble, and we're afraid to come across as arrogant and egotistical. But yeah, I think that message from Jack was really, yeah, it was something that I knew of, but it was not a way in which I acted. So, you know, actually putting it into action was scary, but fuck, do you feel good about it? And, you know, some of the responses I got were incredible. Like, it was people celebrating that achievement with me and acknowledging and asking questions and commenting, and people that I'd, you know, not normally heard of as well. So I think it just shows that, you know, what you put out, you will attract what you put out, for good and for bad, but in this case, for good. So don't rely on the external validation from others.
Jeremy, you know what I actually respect a lot about you? It's because you live by the mantra of, if you want to do something, you're still going to do it, and you're not going to let other people influence you in the process. And I think it's simple but not easy. That's how I think of doing something that you want. Because there's a lot of things we all want to do. There's a lot of things we all want to achieve, and part of that might also involve putting ourselves out there. But we do it regardless. But for a lot of others, they don't. And I think if you're able to live by that sort of value, lots of respect, because it takes guts to do that.
It's hard, bro.
It takes guts. And the reason the people who do bring you up, and this is like a suggestion, bring your friends up. Sometimes it might be easy to bring them down and then, you know, cloak it under the kind of helpful phrasing of just constructive criticism.
Or banter.
But the truth of the matter is, support your friends. Seriously. Like, even if you disagree with what they're doing and you have genuine constructive criticism, there's a way to phrase it, right? And you can sense where there's a difference. Because are you there only to tear them down when they've done something wrong or they've done something embarrassing? Or are you also there, you know, cheering them on and hyping them up? Be your own friend's biggest hype man. I promise you, you'll feel better about yourself. And guess what? They want you there along the ride. They don't want to be in a position where they want to start thinking like, wow, I thought this person was in my corner, but turns out they're not. Be your friend's biggest hype man.
And they remember it. Like, the friend that gets the hype up from you, they fucking remember that, you know, and we know that firsthand with our podcast as well. Like, we'll remember the recurring people that always have a finger to point at and always have something to say, but, you know, always of the critical nature and never something positive. And, you know, then we will also just remember the smallest of things, like a mate that is just a consistent liker, or just, you know, will say something positive to us about what we're doing. And it's those small actions that go a long way. So yeah, be that hype man, be that friend, that supporter, and, you know, it goes a long way, and your mates remember it. Now, point number 4 that we took away from Chris Williamson, another key point that blew us away. What was it?
It's that your happiness doesn't sit at the end of the goals that you are destined to achieve. oftentimes we delude ourselves into thinking that we'll only be happy when we achieve those goals. And we have spoken about this idea before, but it is quite important because oftentimes we are always stuck in this subconscious loop of, when I achieve X amount of money, when I get this job, when I get into this degree, when I get a girlfriend or a boyfriend or a husband or a wife or I have a child, any goal, we believe that we're going to be happy only after then. So it's okay to delay our element of happiness. We can suffer in the meantime because once we achieve that goal, we have the permission to be happy. But the thing is, you've already achieved goals, and you've already achieved goals where you told yourself that you'd be happy afterwards. For me, anecdotally speaking, and I talk about this a lot, but it is pertinent, it was when I got into my master's. So bloody long of studying, so much competition, so much pressure to do well. And I told myself for, a lot of the time last year when I was in honours and hating life, that only then when I get into my master's degree, I'll be happy. And I was my own biggest hypocrite because the truth of the matter is I was happy when I got the acceptance offer, but it fleets. Happiness, it goes, you return back to baseline. And I think that's why it's important to give yourself permission to be happy in the everyday aspects of life, because it's not waiting for you at the end of that goal.
Yeah, that's why I always stress, finding happiness in the mundane. Like, I'm such an advocate for it. Today I bloody made an omelet and cooked it under the grill to fucking perfection, and it just increased my serotonin and dopamine to a new level. And such a mundane activity that someone would just think, okay, yeah, he's just cracked a few eggs and made a decent omelet, big whoop. But like, if you find joy and fulfillment in the mundane, it boosts your energy and it boosts your baseline level, so much so that when you do experience things that are even more heightened, you feel like you're on another planet. You feel like the most euphoric motherfucker, and it's so contagious as well, and others around you will feed off of that, and it's just magnetic. And who wouldn't want to be around someone that has that magnetic, infectious energy of positivity? Like, those are the people that I love hanging around, and I know that if I can be that, then I'm just adding to that positive space in which I would want to be in as well.
Whilst we're on the topic, what would be like a perfect ideal day for you? It can change in time, but for you, what would it be now? It's a summer's day. What's an ideal day for you?
Probably start off with a morning dip at the beach. Like, I'm thinking Elwood Beach. I'm thinking you wake up and it's already like 22 degrees, sun's out, blue sky, a very, very faint brisk wind, and you go for the dip. The water is like lukewarm by this stage of the year. You jump out, you feel $1,000,000. You go grab a coffee with a mate as you're walking back along the pier, along the foreshore rather. You come home, you cook yourself up a mad brekkie. We're talking eggs, we're talking cottage cheese, we're talking maybe a slice of sourdough, bit of avocado, get some medjool dates and blueberries in there. Bang, ready to go. Digest that, go to the gym, pump yourself up in the gym, feeling good. That's just the morning. So look, I won't run through the whole day because in my detail, we'll be here for another podcast episode. But if that is just your first 3 hours of the day, 2 hours of the day, you're already flying, and you're finding so much beauty, happiness, and pleasure in the mundane.
And the reason I asked you that is because those activities that you mentioned, for a lot of people, they are just mundane, but you find meaning in them and you find excitement, you find happiness. And truthfully, those are where the real moments of happiness are. It's when you're reflecting in bed that night, thinking about the beautiful memories you shared that day or the things that you did. It's rarely going to be the material things that you achieved.
Exactly. So, and another Chris that we absolutely love, Chris Griffin, he also talks about this a lot, that, that whole notion of, when I'm doing this or when I achieve this, I will be happy. And so it's the same message here that, Chris Williamson speaks about, as well as Chris Griffin. And it's just so true. It's such a pertinent topic at the moment. And I think it's so pertinent at the moment because, we're in a world in which we're always trying to seek that next best thing. So, if we can actually get into the mindset of actually saying, you know what, I'm happy now with the goals I am achieving, and that's only going to drive me towards future things because I'm already there now and I've already achieved and I've already got that sense of gratitude, you're going to feel so much better for it. And this extends into point number 5. So take away point number 5.
It's expanding your time horizon. Oftentimes we look at our life through the lens of days and weeks, and oftentimes months. But on any journey of self-growth, on any project that you embark on any sort of upskilling development, it is very easy to become impatient because you want results, and you want results now, and you want the tangible, obvious improvements right there in your line of sight. The truth of it though, like a stock, you're going to have days where you're just not seeing the progress. You're going to have weeks, you're going to have troughs. That's where it's huge and it's crucial to actually zoom out as much as you can and look at things through kind of a year to year, or even decades if you're older than us, because we're 24, so we've only had nearly 2.5 decades. But nonetheless, it's zooming out, because once you zoom out, you can actually see the trend. And the way it works is that can, first of all, give you a lot of clarity, and it can almost relieve you of the anxiety that you feel, because the journey to greatness isn't necessarily filled with just self-belief. It's also filled with a ton of doubt, a lot of insecurity, and a ton of vulnerability. And that's the concoction. And that's something he also mentioned, our boy Chris Williamson, is that it's not just self-belief. It's not a Rocky montage video where it's just linear growth. It's completely the opposite. And if people are watching it, you're going to have little spikes and troughs, and you're going to, as long as the trend is positive, you're on the right track. But even if it's taking you longer than you think, if the trend is positive, then there's nothing to worry about, because it's so easy to get seduced and fixated by everyday fluctuations, and it's just not worth doing that. It's what every day trader does, but it's not a way to live life. And one thing he said, which I thought was really liberating, and I think you'd agree with me, is that if you knew that your goals were already predetermined and you're already on that journey, would you be as anxious as you are? Probably not, because it's predetermined, assuming you work for it, right? It's not going to just come out of nowhere. But the idea is if you can strip the anxiety because you have that self-belief that you'll get there, then the journey will just be more enjoyable.
Absolutely. And it's something that I think you're really good at reminding yourself this, seriously, because whenever we talk about the podcast as well, and I'm thinking, fuck, we're doing so much, we're really upping our game, but maybe we're a bit stagnant at the moment. You're really good at, reminding me and reminding us that, mate, look at how far we've come already. Look at that time horizon, expand that time horizon. And, I'm very much fuck, I want to see that now, because maybe that's that element of impatience in me, that sense of urgency in me, which I so often talk about, that wanting to see results then and there. And it's something that I need to be better in. And hearing it from someone like Chris, who says, for the first 3 years of his podcast, he was effectively invisible. He had days where he had 0 listens whatsoever, 0 plays. He started off in a big room with one central Yeti microphone around 4 people at a table. You got to expand the time horizon, and therefore you will see how far we've come. And just before we started talking about this episode recording today, we were reflecting and just thinking about the year in which it's been and how far we've come in this past year, and what are our goals going into next year as well. So expanding that time horizon, it's something that I need to continue to remind myself of. But yeah, hearing that from blokes like him just makes it all the more, I guess, real.
Jeremy, I think that was a lovely kind of way to cap off this fantastic episode. Honestly, Chris Williamson doesn't need any shout outs. He's that huge. He's that profound. And I think a lot of people who might be listening to our episodes are more than well aware of how good his work is. So I'm definitely not going to plug his socials. Maybe if he comes on as a guest on the Big Bros podcast, that's the dream, of course. But any last final words, my friend?
Final words. Yeah, just listen to Modern Wisdom, even though we said we're not going to shout it out. I mean, because we all know who he is, but listen to Modern Wisdom, guys, because it's changed our lives. It's definitely, been a huge inspiration for us for how we want to live our lives, let alone doing a show, but how we want to live our lives and how we are continuing to grow as people. And, as friends and as in relationships as well, it's really shaped our beliefs all for the better. So if you guys aren't listening, if you're fans of us, you'll be fans of him as well. So thanks for joining us today, guys, and we hope you did enjoy this episode. Let us know if you want us to maybe dive into some of these topics with a bit more in depth. We'd be more than happy to do so. Otherwise, happy Tuesday, have a good week, and like and follow for more.
Bye.